So, this is a very special episode of the Adventures in Learning podcast. If you have been following the news at all recently, you know that Hurricane Helene left great devastation, particularly in Western North Carolina. The flooding was horrendous, and so many people lost so much. And one of the things we don't think about that people would lose when we look at these images are their books. And so today I want to welcome an author to our program from Western North Carolina, Carolyn Fraiser, who I was fortunate enough to meet last year at the North Carolina Reading Conference. And she is doing an amazing job collecting books for K-12 schools in Western North Carolina. And so I want to invite you in and let's talk about this and see if we can't help flood Western North Carolina with some children's picture books. Carolyn, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Diane. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're based in Western North Carolina, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm in Transylvania County, which is just south of where the devastation hit in Asheville, Chimney Rock area.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like being in Western North Carolina right now, sort of what the impact is, what people are seeing?
Well, it's just devastating. I grew up around here. I went to school in Asheville. We took family vacations to Chimney Rock. I had my first professional job in Swannanoa. And to see those areas just completely devastated, it's really heartbreaking. And I think even people who've been here a short time um, were shell-shocked. You know, we were in the dark in Transylvania County for about five days where we had no communications come in. We could barely get a text out to families to tell them we were safe, but we did not hear the news. We did not see the images coming in. And when they came in, they literally came in like a flood. And it just devastated. It just it
Yes,
just devastated us.
I my heart goes out to you for that. We used to have a home in Lake Lure, and I took my children to Chimney Rock when they were growing up. We would go to the Fudge Place, we would go to Bat Cave, and to see those completely gone it's heartbreaking.
Yes.
And I guess one of the things that I'm realizing, and your Instagram post actually made me feel like I wasn't helpless any longer, that there was something I could do to make a difference. And what Carolyn is doing is collecting children's picture books. And if you can tell us a little bit about the need for that and where that came from, that would be great.
Well, I was just coming back from the School Media Library Association conference that I managed to get out for. And I was driving home and it just burdened my heart to think, I've got to do something. And I didn't know what. And I just kept mulling around with it in my brain. And I knew children had been affected all across our region. And I had no idea what to do. I felt so helpless. And when I got home, I saw a post from a local teacher of a middle school here in my county and just simply said, I'm looking for some books to give to my students who have lost everything. And I was like, I could do that. That's something I can do. I've got these connections with the Kidlit community, and they're amazing, generous group of people. And I was like, surely we could get a few books to put into their hands. And so I put out the call. I simply just posted once on each social media platform. And in the meantime, I had another teacher contact me in my county saying, hey, we're looking for books too. There was a trailer park that totally flooded out right down the street from their school, and many of their kids went there. And they wanted to give some books to those kids. So my original vision was, okay, maybe I can gather 20 to 30 books and just kind of put them into the hands of these teachers so that they could have something to give to these kids who were hurting so badly and who lost everything. And from there, it just exploded. Um, I got so many messages coming into my direct mail on these social platforms. And in the meantime, I heard about a school 1 county over that their whole K-4 campus was flooded out, and they were needing to build all of their classroom libraries from the ground up. Um, the need is massive. And I just found out this week that there were 2 other schools that were completely flooded and have sustained substantial damage. Um, I'm in the process of trying to reach out to them as well. But in the meantime, I'm starting to get all these books flood in. And honestly, I have over 200 books right now sitting in my little 9 by 10 office. And I've got 10 boxes sitting outside right
I was going to
now.
say my box is out there today, I think.
Is it? Is it good? I had an educational publisher offer to send me several boxes of books, educational books for these classrooms. So I'm looking at the need, and I'm looking at even what I have is barely scratching the surface. And it's so much more than picture books. We need, board books, early readers, leveled readers, middle grade books for those older elementary kids, and even for, kids going into middle school. Um, I'm getting a ton of picture books and they're great. They're great, but we need all kinds
Right.
of books to help these teachers rebuild.
No, that makes so much sense to me. And, if you're listening, there are so many great books out there that you can get for kids. And I would be happy to put a link in the show notes, just with some suggestions with possibilities. So if you don't know much about children's literature, um, I can give you a link with sort of some of my favorites. Carolyn, if you want to send stuff to me as well, we could compile a list that we could put out just to help people start thinking about all of the books that run that gamut from, the early board books on up really to middle grade and nonfiction as well. I'd be happy to do
Absolutely.
that.
I'm taking all the nonfiction out and putting it in its own box because I just have a feeling the teachers are really going to want that. And I want to make sure they're easy to access.
So as much as we can get for the teachers, we will do. So if somebody is listening and it's like, I want to do something, I've been trying to figure out how can I help? Where do they go? How do they contact you?
Well, you can ping me on any social media platform. I'm at Carolyn B. Fraiser, Fraiser, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Blue Sky. That's my handle. Or you can go directly to my website at carolynbfraiser.com. And there is an icon on my homepage that has a link to my contact page. And if you just let me know that you're wanting to send books, I will give you the address of where to send them, and we can go from there.
That sounds amazing. So I'll drop all of that information into the show notes. So, folks, if you're listening, check the show notes because it'll have links to where to find Carolyn, as well as if you need ideas to get started on what books to send, there'll be links for that as well. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want you to learn a little bit more about the woman behind flooding Western North Carolina with books.
Was
So, welcome back to the Adventures in Learning podcast. You have heard the woman behind the idea of getting books into the hands of kids. Let's learn a little bit about her. So, Carolyn, you are an author in your own right. And when I met you, you were talking about your book, MoonTtree. Can you, for our listeners who may not know much about you, can you talk a little bit about your adventures in learning, the books you have out, kind of how you got into writing in the first place?
Oh my gosh, those are 3 very in-depth questions. Well, I've always loved writing, even since I was a kid. I loved books. I devoured them as soon as I could learn to read. So it was very natural that I started to pick up a pencil and just start to create my own stories, even in early elementary school. So that followed me into high school, where I began to explore journalism and different things. And I ended up getting a degree in communications and a master's in journalism. And then it's just become a lifelong career for me. I write full time for nonprofits. And I also do some graphic design work for them. So it has just really launched a career. Um, it was later on that I really started to look into children's literature. I think it was a little over 10 years ago I started to get the kid lit bug. And I started to experiment with writing children's books. And it did take me 10 years to get something published. But MoonTtree is my debut children's book. It is a nonfiction story about a group of seeds that flew to the moon on Apollo 14 back in 1971. And it's an exciting story. The seeds were lost to history, almost lost to history until a third grade girl stepped in and brought them back into the collective memory of our country. And what's so fascinating is that just a few months after the book came out, NASA and the U.S. Forest Service harvested seeds from these original trees and sent them up on Artemis 1
Oh,
back in
wow.
2022. So they have come back and they are growing these trees as the Artemis generation of moon trees. And the first batch of those trees were released to schools, forest services, state capitals across the US just this past summer. So they will be rolling those out in the next 2 years.
Oh,
But
that's exciting and timely.
yeah, and it's such a great learning opportunity for kids.
And I love the fact that you've got that passion for telling stories. How did you first come to know the MoonTree story?
Oh goodness. I think it was right right before the pandemic. I went to our local national forest, which was Pisgah National Forest here in North Carolina, to do some research for a possible forestry article for a kids magazine, because I do a lot of writing for kids magazines as well. And we have a museum up there called the Cradle of Forestry, because it was kind of where modern day forestry began here in the United States. So I was doing some exploring around there, and a placard caught my eye as I was walking past it. And it's part of an indoor outdoor museum. So there's lots of trails and a lot of historic buildings and stuff to explore. And I had been there several times and never saw this tree. But I saw MoonTree out of the corner of my eye. And just like the third grade girl asked in my book, I asked the question, what is a moon tree? I grew up just south of Cape Canaveral in Florida, and we followed the space program, would always be outside looking up at the moon and the stars through my dad's binoculars. And just, I was always interested in space, and I had never heard of a moon tree before. So it really got my attention. So I literally backpedaled about 50 steps because I had kept walking and my brain was processing. And I read the story of astronaut Stuart Roosa. And I just was captivated. So I took some pictures and kind of filed it away and went about my journey. And I never did find an article to read that day, but that little idea kept nagging at me. So within a few weeks, I said I knew I just had to throw everything to the wind and go research this. And I dove down into a wormhole of about 5 months of research. I followed every rabbit trail I could in order to really package together the whole story.
And so you dove into your wormhole for 5 months, and I totally can relate. I do that as well. I'm imagining you had so much at the end of that. How did you decide how to structure this story? How to, what stays, what goes? Because I'm sure you had more than you could fit into the confines of a kid's book.
To give you any idea, my works cited list was 20 pages long, single spaced.
Wow.
It was massive. And yes, I had no idea what to put in and what not to put in. And I sat on my research for a while, and a friend lent me her cabin for the weekend. So I went up there and I did a brain dump. and just wrote out, the story as I knew it with as many details in it. It had sidebars, it had little call out quotes, it had back matter all over. I mean, it was a massive project. I think the main text was somewhere around 1,500 words or whatever. Um, so I sent it to her and said, "Hey, what do you think?" And she's like, "It's good, but I want you to think outside of the box." She kept pushing me a little bit further. So I went and wrote another version of it, and it was very voicey and very a little more interactive. And I sent that out, but it still wasn't quite there. And an agent um, pushed me and she said, "You know what? I love this story, but I hate the voice she used with it." She says, "Can you try something a little lyrical?" And so I sat on it for probably another 3 to 4 months, just like, okay, what do I do? I mean, I write lyrically, but I just didn't know. I didn't know what was going to come together. So one day I just started to think about all the different people who played a part in the MoonTree story. And if any one of them did not step up and do their part, the story wouldn't have happened, or it would have been completely lost to history. So each one of them mattered. Each one made a difference. So I got up the next morning. I put all my research aside. I didn't look at it. And I just said, okay, with that in my mind, what's the core of the story? And the story that ended up being published, that came out.
That's amazing. And that's encouraging for anybody who has ever sat down to try to write something and got blocked. And
It's hard.
it is. And I love the perseverance. I mean, it wasn't just one version, you did three. And those three versions that you just told us about, I'm sure there were many others
Oh,
in
yeah.
between, different iterations of it. But I think that's important because often when we're encouraging kids to write, we don't give them that space, the
Mhm.
ability to be able to take a step back from it and to go, that
Exactly.
voice didn't work. Let's rewrite it because we're always so busy moving to the next thing. And I think if we're talking about authentic writing, it is a much deeper, more time consuming process than that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it does all writing is revision, and it's rewriting over and over and over again until you just polish it up and it becomes perfect. It's kind of like that stone you just got to keep chipping away at to sculpt that end product. And sometimes it's just not there, and you have to cut some pieces that are really hard to cut. But when you see the final product, it all makes sense. But it looks effortlessly, but it's not.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's probably with all art,
Mhm.
it's that appearance of effortlessness, never mind all the work that went on behind the scenes.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you have some other books that are due out or are out right now. Can you tell us a little bit about those as well?
Well, I've done some educational projects. I did right after MoonTree came out. I did a work for hire project on for one company for this series called Our Solar System. And so I wrote a book on the moons, and they literally launched right at the same time. This is more of a level reader for middle and high school students who are reading on a lower elementary grade level. And then a year later, I another educational book called Bat Migration came out that was part of a series on animal migration. So this is more for elementary school kids who are in the upper elementary school, but reading on a lower elementary level and who are interested in bats. And I mean, I didn't know bats could be so cool, but they are.
And they are cool. Are there any stories sort of tickling around in the back of your head, sending you down wormholes the way MoonTree did?
Oh my gosh. Yes, but
I know
I
you can't
can't
tell
talk
us.
about those. Some of them, I'm still just starting to scrape the surface on and see where is this leading. But I haven't had much time to really devote to it. Um,
Where do you find inspiration?
oh gosh, everywhere. I find it in nature. Sometimes I just find it by walking past. I wrote a story from a name of a store that I saw in the town next to me. I was just coming home and passing it and saw the name of the store, and suddenly this story starts to unfold. It was just out of the weirdest, oddest places. My next trade book is called M is for Mason Jar, and that was written out of a dare the um, during the pandemic. And I never thought it would be published, but it is, and it's coming out next year. So they come in the oddest places. I just learned to jot notes down in my cell phone or on a little sheet of paper to remind me to kind of explore it later.
And I think maybe the other piece I'm getting from that is be open to
Mhm.
all kinds of experiences, because you never know when you're out exploring or discovering what might actually inspire you to do something creative.
Exactly. I mean, something as simple as taking a walk up the street. I mean, I'm a very observant person, so I take note of these little tiny things, a little insect on a branch or something new on the road, or the way the wind is blowing the trees or the flowers or something. And I can sit there and just think about those things. And sometimes the little threads of different stories come in and suddenly they just start to mesh together. And it's because I've let my brain relax enough to let those creative energies start to flow.
That makes so much sense. So I want to wrap up our conversation, but I want to bring people back to the idea that we want to be sending books to these kids in Western North Carolina. So I grew up in North Carolina. I love Western North Carolina, but if we've got a listener who's never been there, can you describe what makes this region so special?
Oh my goodness. There's so many things, but I think what draws people to Western North Carolina in specific is its beauty. I mean, there's just the rolling hills, and in the fall, nature just shows off. And there's these brilliant colors. You've got streams just going through the mountain hills and the waterfalls. It's just breathtaking. But I think for me, especially in the last few weeks, it's that sense of community that we all come together and support each other with our arms wrapped around each other during times of crisis. And that has just been what really endears me to this region, I think, more than any other place I've lived.
And we want to wrap our arms around you in this time of crisis as well. So please, I'm going to ask one more time, folks, go to the links. And if you can, send some books to help support the kids in Western North Carolina. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adventures in Learning podcast.
Thank you so much.